let's go through the next batch of 10. Number 30, center Creed Humphrey, Kansas City Chiefs. Perfect example. Jason Kelce retires. Creed Humphrey might be the best center in the NFL. Are you going to drop him below other guys? Number 29, offensive tackle Andrew Thomas from the New York Giants. Number 28, Penei Sewell, offensive tackle from the Detroit Lions. Number 27, Quinnen Williams, defensive tackle from the New York Jets. 26, Kyle Hamilton, safety from the Baltimore Ravens. 25, wide receiver A.J. Brown, Philadelphia Eagles. 24, wide receiver Jamar Chase, Cincinnati Bengals. 23, safety Antoine Winfield Jr., Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 22, also from the Buccaneers, tackle Tristan Wirfs. And 21, offensive tackle Lane Johnson from the Philadelphia Eagles. Where do you want to hit here?
I don't have a lot to argue with this current 10. I mean, I think the one that you would naturally maybe move down if you could is Lane Johnson, but who am I to bring Lane Johnson down, right? I mean, it's just his career's been insane. He's been the best right tackle in the NFL for like 10 years. And so, yeah, basically until the dude retires, it's hard to take him out of the top 30. You have him at 21. I think there's some people who might go like, okay, well, it's Tristan Wirfs' time. It's Penei Sewell's time. You can move him ahead of Lane Johnson. But even playing through injuries last year, I mean, Lane was putting up solid numbers, and he's still one of the best in the league. So it's hard to even move him down. But I don't really have a lot of other criticism, because this is also where you get into a situation where you go, okay, well, Jamar Chase is, better than the 24th player in the NFL.
Right.
Who are you going to put him over? Like, you start getting in the top 20, I don't want to spoil it, but like CeeDee Lamb's at 20. Like, and sure, okay, you can make an argument, you put him like right above CeeDee Lamb if you want, but again, that's 4 or 5 spots. So maybe you move him up if you have faith that Joe Burrow's going to be back this year. He's going to bounce back to just that truly elite form that he was at the previous season. But I believe CeeDee Lamb's year last year was a higher graded season than either of the 2 highest graded seasons that Jamar Chase has had. So that's kind of where we're at with that debate. I think that a lot of people are going to talk about that, but it's hard to move anybody there. Creed, you mentioned, plays the center position basically better than anybody else does. It kind of just comes down to like, okay, does positional value with center go into account at all here with him? Because you might be able to move him down a little bit further if you want some more flashier names, some skilled position players above him, but it's hard to argue with the results of how good he plays the position. So I think right around 30 is at least where the conversation is with Creed Humphrey. So I really don't have a ton of criticism for this one. I think that Kyle Hamilton and Antoine Winfield Jr. are appropriately rated here within the 20s. You'll talk to some people, they'll tell you that Kyle Hamilton's better, so he should be above Winfield Jr. Obviously, they're extremely wrong in that thinking. So Winfield Jr. as the guy who should have had the most votes for Defensive Player of the Year as a safety, go Bucks. I think that they're both in the right spot here in the mid-20s, all jokes aside. These are 2 very unique players who impact the game at a very high level from the safety position. They pass rush, they're great in run defense, they're great in coverage. They'll give you those turnover plays with not only interceptions, but also forced fumbles, things like that. They're just there's so many ways you can impact the game from the safety spot, and it feels like those 2 do it better than basically anybody else does. So I like that you have them here on this list. But other than that, man, I really don't have too much feedback on this one.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out that this is definitely a list where all positions are created equal. Position agnostic, I think, is a term we've used before to kind of describe this. The value doesn't factor into it, right? If it was a value-based list, the top 28 guys would be quarterbacks, and then we start getting into other all pros at wide receiver, et cetera. So Creed Humphrey, it's a non-flashy position, but he's really, really good and has been from day one, in particular as a run blocker. That's one where, so if you're really into the weeds with PFF grades, we would tend to lean on pass blocking from offensive tackles over run blocking, which is why guys like Laramie Tunsil, are still amazing players, even though his run blocking is average. For center, it kind of flips a bit, where the best run blocking centers are the guys that have really high overall grades. And the reasoning behind that is they're simply pass blocking one-on-one a lot less, right? Offensive tackles, effectively almost every single pass blocking snap, are pass blocking one-on-one. So if you are not good at that, you're going to get lit up by this endless sequence of top-tier edge rushers we're talking about here, and they're going to beat you 15 times a game, and suddenly the offense is completely non-tenable. Most of your pass blocking as a center is done as part of like double teams. It's fine. It's giving help. It's, helping a guard out. It's being a combination block, not necessarily blocking a nose tackle one-on-one. So even if you are a little bit less proficient as a pass blocker than some of the other guys out there, it's not as big a deal as it is when you're a tackle, right? And you can more than offset that by being a top-tier run blocker as well. So center is a little bit different in the way we look at it. And, even a guy like Jason Kelce, run blocking was by far the stronger element of Jason Kelce's Hall of Fame career. I don't know that he was ever the best pass blocking center in the NFL as this undersized center, but he was so good with his mobility, with his work on screens, with getting out and using his athleticism to run block that he became arguably the best center of his generation. So I think generally this list, other than special teams, it doesn't matter what position you play. On special teams only because you're just not playing as much as these other guys. But I think that's the reasoning why guys like Creed Humphrey rank up with, the best wide receivers, the best corners in the NFL, et cetera. The only other point with this is I think it's a very real kind of discussion point of how much you weigh the most recent season, right? So this does differ from the PFF 101 because it's not just focusing on last year, it's projecting forward. And obviously the most recent evidence we have for any one of these guys is the 2023 NFL season. But we also know that the 2023 NFL season is not necessarily how these guys are going to go play in the 2024 NFL season. Volatility being what it is, injuries being a factor, support system, all those kinds of things. So it's easy to just look at who was the top graded guy last year. He's got to be, 1, 2, 3, 5, whatever. But we're looking at who's likely to be the best player next year, and that's not necessarily the case if you're buying into a guy at his highest possible point and projecting that forward as that's who he's going to be going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that you could do this exercise. There's a lot of people who are in the chat talking about Sewell being a lot higher, and I think that there's basically an infinite amount of combinations. I know it's not infinite, but even just within this group of 10 that you have here, Lane Johnson, Tristan Wirfs, Penei Sewell, Andrew Thomas, you throw Creed Humphrey, but even if you just wanted to keep it the offensive tackles, there's just so many different combinations of how you could rank these players, and they're all very close here on this list. And there's a lot of people talking about Sewell being higher, and you could certainly put Sewell higher with the way that he played last season. But you mentioned it's sort of beauty is in the eye of the ranker, if you will, here, and it's like, how much weight are you putting in from the 2023 season versus projecting versus what they've already done? So that's sort of how you kind of come up with it. But I do agree that a lot of these guys deserve to just be close to each other as some of the best tackles in the league.
I think Penei Sewell versus Trent Williams is a really interesting kind of case in point here, right? Because Penei Sewell was the highest graded offensive tackle in the NFL last season by PFF grades, a hair above Trent Williams. And if you look at Sewell's career, he's got that like nice, neat curve that we all like to see, right? Started off reasonably well. Year 2 was a step forward. Year 3 was like all pro level. This is it. This is the curve that everyone wants to see. His career looks a lot like Trent Williams' career to start with, where, okay, Trent took a year longer, but he was average as a rookie. Year 2 was a step forward. Year 3 was a step forward. And then year 4 for Trent was the 92 grade, was the overall elite play, one of the best tackles in football. Now, it took Trent 3 more years to get back to that level, right? He had 2 more. He took a step back after the elite year in year 4, had a couple of really good years, but weren't at the level before. And then 2016, he was back being the best offensive tackle in the NFL with an elite grade, et cetera, et cetera. And then the other point is, over his career now, Trent has done that level of sort of 91, 92 type of season 6 times, right? So Penei Sewell, it's the most recent one we've seen, but it's also one. Trent Williams has done it 6 times, including the most recent season. So there's just so much more credit in the bank for a guy like Trent Williams, whereas Penei Sewell, okay, we just saw that he can do that. We've at least realized that ceiling. We know that he's capable of that level of play. It's not an automatic given that he's going to do it again in 2024 if it was, I think you would put him up there with Trent Williams and say this guy might be, the best offensive tackle in the NFL. He might be a guy in the top 10. But it's that uncertainty, I think, that causes you or forces you to put him, in the top 30 instead of the top 10.
Yeah.